We remember back in the day, I remember back in the day, I'm not going to go long on this, but what life was like without Jesus. A lot of you don't know this, but that word Jesus, the name Jesus, was never even mentioned in our family. Church, we didn't know what church was as kids. My brother and I, Mike and I, we didn't know. We'd never seen or experienced, Christ in the life. And so I can't tell you it was dark times, but it would have been if it continued. At the same time, I remember my mother would tell my brother Mike and I, and we're little guys, get in the car. Where are we going? And then my mom had a friend, and she goes, well, we're going to see where your dad's at. My dad was always running around. We never knew where he was going, but he did like the action. He wanted to have that action. And I remember what life was like. I was always wondering, as a little guy, is this what my life is going to be? I didn't see any harm in it. But I thought, okay, well, let's see where this goes, this little guy. But when he gave his heart to the Lord, I remember going to that church. I remember when they drove away from that little church over here in Alameda. A little, like you saw the building there, the interior. When we drove off, we'd go over these railroad tracks going back home. And my mother and him started talking and sharing about we need to start coming to church. We need to start bringing the family to church. And my father, from that day one, was on fire for God. Now, I'd like to share with you that we're here to honor my father, but to glorify God. Amen. And you cannot talk about my father without talking about God, because they go hand in hand. And that's what we experienced through our lives. That's what I experienced as a child, watching my dad, and he would be bringing us to church, and he wanted to be involved in everything. And like he said, he didn't know what to do. He said, but he's the man that would raise his hand. And we went to this little church over on, I think it's Main Street, San Jose. And we were new there. And they needed a volunteer. And he wanted to paint, well, actually, he volunteered himself. It was one of those where I want to paint the building, the exterior of the church. So I'm a little guy, and I'm at the 2-story church, and he wanted me to tie a rope around him and hold him while he hangs off the building and paint the church.
Oh my God!
But he painted the church. With no help but me and him. I'm sure my brother has some experiences too like that, but he always wanted to be involved. And whether it was pulling weeds or whatever at the very beginning, he wanted to be involved. Even here, it was at the time, it was Faith Temple. Pastor Foreman had a contest. Okay, we always had, Pastor Foreman was very creative on things to win souls and bring people in. And my father's like this, Well, here's one that's going to get you. Remember I think it was 1966, 65, Batman? Yeah. Batman, okay. It was a real popular TV series. Well, my father had this idea, well, Batman's popular. I'll dress like Batman, and I'll go to the flea market and invite children to church. And that's what he did. He was there. From the waist up, he was Batman. I don't know what waist down. I don't think he wore those little. But what I love as an example, I love watching my father and anything he could do to win souls or lead people to the church. I love that he would get on the buses. My father was a terrible driver. I don't know if any of you know. But I could drive a bus. And he loved bringing kids to church. There was Pastor Furman had there was a baking thing where you would get some funds. And basically, my father wanted to enter the contest and make a cake. And he told my mother, no, Martha, stay out. I got this. He wanted to make a cake, And he thought he could sell his cake and it was going to go towards the ministry. And he was involved in everything. And what I would have to share is, I hate to say spectator, but in a way I was kind of standing back. I love watching him because he was a strong man, very humble. And I think that really touched my heart. Because I saw when he was young, his forearms, he used to be a boxer. I don't know if any of you knew that. He boxed over at Civic Auditorium. But as a young man, he was restless, and he liked fighting. When he mentioned about, in the video here, about the jacket that he wore because he got cut, well, apparently they used shavers, and the gangs would cut each other up in fights, you know. And so that's why he wore a leather jacket. And I was just wondering why he had a scar here. But, you know, that's my father. But what's so wonderful in the stories that the pastors have shared, you saw his heart. You saw his sense of humor. Most of all, you saw his love for Christ. And again, like I said, spectator, because it's really surreal. But in his last days, I used to watch him, and he lost all his weight. His hearing went. Oh, he was so disappointed when his hearing went because they didn't let him go into the jails anymore. He wanted to live until he was 100. He still wanted to continue sharing the love of Christ. And that was such a blessing for all of his children, for all of us, to see a wonderful example of a father loving his father. And when I was at the house the day, and I think all of us have a little different story because we're at different times, but Annette and I, we wanted to know if we should take him to the doctor. Yeah, so it was like, Dad, would you like to go to the hospital or see a doctor? No. And then there was another question as, well, Dad, would you want hospice to come and get care here? No. Okay, and my sister looked back at me, okay, and she goes, okay, what's he going to say? And he goes, well, Dad, what would you like to do? And he said, and this really would touch me till I'm with him, as he looked up and he pointed, he goes, I want to be with Martha, and I want to be with Jesus. And it was so touching because Annette turned over and looked at me and we're going, wow, he made up his mind. But what was so wonderful, there are so many stories that happen right after that, where we see, I would say, miracles, loving stories, a love story. We see how much he loved Jesus. We see how much he loved our mother. Just a wonderful example, and he just made up his mind with excitement. I'm going there. Now, my personal, what he shared with me, he called me over and he goes, you're my number one. You're my number one son. He pulled me close to him. He says, son, he goes, when I hug Jesus, I'm going to tell him to take care of my family. And I said, Dad, he's already been doing that. But it was so wonderful at seeing where his heart is. And in my heart, I really believe that's what he did. Oh, by the way, Jesus, thank you. Take care of my family. I believe that's my father. Yeah. So I just want to share that with you. My father was a very loving man. You've seen that. I can't go any further because, I mean, it was beautiful testimonies. Pastor Tony, thank you. Jens, thank you. Kurt, that was beautiful. And Melinda, wow. You broke a tear in my eye on that one. So how great they are. In fact, I'm going to share that one more thing is, when I shared that my father always volunteered, when that church he painted, one day, it was a Beverly Shea from the Billy Graham Crusade who was saying how great thou art. And my dad just loved that. Now, he's a young man. He's in his 20s. But he started practicing singing how great thou art. That's why Melinda sang that. And he thought he could sing. You know? So he would go, Martha, am I an alto or a tenor? And we'd be driving to church, and he'd be practicing that. So anyway, he got the ear of the pastor and said, Pastor, I want to sing how great thou art. And he wanted to be a main feature every Sunday. Now, he couldn't sing, but anyway, the last time I heard him sing how great thou art, I think there's a picture here. That's what he looked at the time with a suit. He has his hand pocket. That's why I remember him. But he had this big smile. And he came up to the mic, and he would do that, oh Lord my God, and everybody was supposed to, but it was like he was thinking he'd make a big impact. And he sang it with all his heart. I mean, the voice cracked, broke, and everything, but he was singing as loud as he didn't even need a mic. But what was so wonderful was when he was done, he handed the mic over, and he was really proud of that and he had many moments, but the last time I remember seeing him, he goes, the pastor, when I goes, God bless Brother John. You know, he can't sing, but he has a wonderful heart. So anyway, that's my father. And anyway, in our closing, I'll share with you, if any of you, haven't received the Lord in your heart, or even been thinking about it, or your life is upside down right now, it's not a better time to stop and say, I want what he has. I want the Lord in my heart. I want my life to change. I want things to turn around, because I'm going to tell you, I did that. Even though I had a wonderful father and a wonderful mother that were faithful through life, they were wonderful examples, and you can't run away from the truth. And the truth is that Jesus died for our sins. He loves us, and he's waiting with open arms. And so, when my father, when I made some bad decisions, he was never on my back, telling me, son, you're going the wrong way. What he did is he lived a good life, and he was a good example. And I said, I got to have that. I want to be like my dad. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you before Pastor George closes here. But I want to also share, there's a lot of you, like I mentioned earlier, that he mentioned names. And when my father would mention your name, there's a lot of you that I don't know in the relationship like he had with you. But the family knows how special you are, because he mentioned your name and how he would say your name. Even Pastor George here, when we'd be in the men's Bible study at the time, my father would go and he just, at different times he'd go, Pastor George, I love him. He has such a wonderful heart. I love Pastor George. What he's doing, but I knew where his heart's at. Sam Hinman, thank you for your prayers. Sam, even on the last days before he went to be the Lord, he said he wanted to let us know to love pastors. And I love Sam. Sam Hinman. Tell Sam I love him. Okay, Jack Horton, he mentioned your name.
Yes.
Let him know I love him. And there were so many, like I said, that he acknowledged. Mike and Phoebe loved you. There's so many names. But thank you again. A lot of laughter. We love it. We're looking forward to see our father and mother someday. But we know where they're at, and that's where we want to go.